Hey, this is Charlie Thompson, and I just wanted to do a quick end of the semester recap. Goodbye. Thanks for all the geography kind of video. So last week, David Wallace-Wells, you remember David Wallace-Wells, the guy behind the most depressing video I've ever seen in my entire life. He was just testifying before Congress on the cost of doing nothing about climate change. And I thought the way he said things was different than the way I had heard things in the past. And so I wanted to share that with you because I've actually found it to be really, really hopeful. And I can use all the good news I can get these days. I think we all can. So, yeah, here's one. So according to the CDC, and these are obviously old numbers, I think we'll probably find out that at least 1 million Americans died as a result of COVID-19. But for the numbers that he had from last year, coronavirus had killed last year about 350,000 Americans, which is a lot. Oh, and I put the links. There's a video because it was, he testified before Congress. So there's a recording of his video. And also they always have a PDF of his statement. So whatever he's reading off, you can always download a copy of that if you wanted to go look into the details, fact check him, get more information, whatever. There's the links for the video and also to download his testimony. So last year, about 350,000 Americans died from COVID, which is also about the same amount of Americans that die every year from air pollution, from burning fossil fuels. So every year, right now, we're losing 350,000 Americans because of bad air quality from burning fossil fuels. The Lancet, which is a British medical publication, puts the global death toll of air pollution at 9 million people a year. So globally, just an appalling, an amazing death toll. These are people that die early, extra people that die. Obviously, people die every year, but these are extra people that die. And in addition to that, their quality of life would have been really destroyed by lung damage before they die. The Clean Air Act, passed in 1970 by Richard Nixon, is saving about 370,000 American lives every single year because of the limits that we have already put on air pollution, which are good, but they're not nearly good enough. So the Clean Air Act delivers $3 trillion worth of economic benefits, and the problem? It's not a problem, but the problem with that is that the people that fight the Clean Air Act are the polluting industries. So the benefits go to the poorest and the most marginalized communities who previously had suffered the most from pollution. And study after study after study shows that the poor and the marginalized are disproportionately affected by pollution, just like the poor and the marginalized were disproportionately affected by COVID. They couldn't stay home. They had to keep going to work, as opposed to the wealthy that could stay home and have everything delivered, so they weren't exposed to COVID. There's a lot of similarities between issues that affect everybody. Imagine that. It seems like a commonality in the issues that affect everybody is it usually affects the poor more than it affects the wealthy. I'll have to look into that later. So, other wildfires. The trend in wildfires, dramatic growth in the acres burned. There's been a quadrupling in the amount that has burned on average every year over the last 4 decades. 5 of the 6 largest fires in California's history all happened in 2020. So with climate change and temperature, I've gotten used to saying things like, 5 of the 6th warmest years ever recorded occurred in the last 6 years. All of the recorded years but 1 that are the warmest in the top 10 have all happened since 2000. So stuff like that I'm used to saying, but 5 of the 6 largest fires ever recorded in California's history all happened in 2020. That's a clue. In fact, the LA Times just ran an opinion piece that said, we're not in a drought. It's just dry all the time now. California's climate has shifted, and we're seeing that. In 2020, wildfire smoke accounted for more than half of the air pollution in the United States. So now you've got a better handle on, 350,000 Americans on average die from air pollution from burning fossil fuels. So wildfire smoke also turns out to be incredibly polluting, also part of the positive feedback loop of the darkening of the ice sheets that's melting the ice sheets faster. Since 1990 in California, 60% of all new residential development in the state has come in wildfire-prone areas. So we're actually, because of economic forces, we're deliberately building in the worst possible areas. Half of all of the fossil fuel emissions have come in the last 25 years. Half of the fossil fuels have been burned. Half of the emissions have come just since the show Friends premiered. And I threw that in because I think it highlights how effective the fossil fuel propaganda machine has been at delaying action on curtailing emissions from fossil fuels that, as you've seen, would have dramatic health benefits for all Americans. Here's the good news. The total amount of money it's going to take to shift from burning fossil fuels to generating electricity through renewables would be totally paid for by not having to pay for people that are harmed by bad air quality. A total decarbonization of the American electricity sector would be entirely paid for by the public health benefits of cleaner air. So it's a win-win. We get cheaper electricity, we get better air to breathe, we get a better planet to live in. It's a win-win-win. The people that are going to lose are the fossil fuel companies, so they're ramping up the advertising, trying to frighten everybody. The International Monetary Fund calculated that right now, the unpaid environmental costs of fossil fuels amount to a global subsidy of over $5 trillion. So that's damage that's being done by burning fossil fuels that the fossil fuel companies aren't paying for. Today, America's coal industry employs about 43,000 workers. Oil and gas employs about 135,000 workers. Right now in the United States, there's 3.3 million workers working in renewable energy. 25 million jobs could be created by rapid electricity decarbonization. So shifting from natural gas and coal and oil for making electricity, shifting from that to renewables would generate incredible jobs for the U.S., as well as making a better planet to live on. It's another win-win-win. Today, renewables are the cheapest way to generate electricity. Last week, California generated a record 94% of its electricity from renewables. That wasn't the whole week, just one day. But it's a sign of things to come as more and more investment is being directed because of market forces, because of governmental policy. More money is being directed at renewables rather than fossil fuels. Okay, so this is Earth. Here's the last 24 hours of satellite imagery for Earth. And I wanted to point out some of the things that you might be familiar with now that you wouldn't have been familiar with at the beginning of the semester. So we've got the ITCZ. You can see the Intertropical Convergence Zone. You can see the shine of the sun as it moves across. You can actually see the reflection of the sun off the ocean. And if we had latitude and longitude turned on, you'd see that the sun is now above the equator. We're heading from spring into summer. So remember everything. The ITCZ, the subtropical highs, the polar front, all that's going to shift north. Along here, we've got the polar front with a cold front developing right there and a warm front right there. Looks like there's high pressure over California. Everything appears to be rotating clockwise, and it's clear. And it's clear because there's high pressure, so air is sinking. If we go to, hopefully this will work. If we go to GOES 16, if we go to the GOES East, things are a little more dramatic. You can still see the ITCZ. You can see these magnificent thunderclouds in the Amazon. You can see storms making their way across North America. Oh, that's all daily thunderstorms right there. If you notice over Cuba, there's daily thunderstorms cooking off, and it looks like there might be something going on along the polar front, but it looks like it's mainly thunderstorms cooking off. Oh, that makes sense, on the downslope side of the Rockies. And then another storm where the cold front and a warm front moving over to Europe. So I just wanted to cover that. Okay, I wanted to go through and tell you why I switched the chapters around and show you how in my head everything after the third midterm fits together. So chapter 8 was all about plate tectonics and earthquakes and volcanoes and how the plates move around and crash into each other and create new land. So we saw volcanic activity. We saw subduction that's associated with volcanic activity and new crust being generated. So chapter 8 was all about making new land, or altering the land that we already have by plate collisions. Chapter 9 was weathering and mass movement, so now we're tearing shit down. Chapter 8, we made all this new stuff. Chapter 9, we're looking at the mechanisms that mountains get torn down. I went to chapter 12 with glaciers, because glaciers are another way that shit gets torn down, that mountains get reduced to foothills over, hundreds of thousands of years. So it seemed to make sense that we made the new land, and then weathering, mass movement, the general processes about how stuff gets worn away. And then I thought it made sense to go from glaciers up in the highest of mountains, and at the bottom of those glaciers, at the end of the glaciers, there's often a stream, which is rivers, right? So rivers is transporting that material that's been ground down by glaciers and other forces. Then we get into the oceans, which is more transporting materials. And then the last two chapters, oh man, and then we had chapter 13 on ecology. Big cycles, big concepts, things like photosynthesis and respiration and food pyramids and nutrients and energy pathways and how everything fits together. And then finally, chapter 14 is on biomes, which are, those groups of plants and animals. It's why Earth's plant and animal communities look the way they do. Like deserts look the way they do for a reason. Rainforests look the way they do for a reason. Mediterranean climates look the way they do for a reason. Boreal forests and montane forests look the way they do for a reason. Tundra looks the way... All of Earth's biomes look the way they do for a reason. Some of those are more obvious than others. We didn't get into the nitty-gritty of biogeography, which would address things like Allen's law and Bergmann's law. And Allen's law is the idea that animals in hot places have longer extremities, like jackrabbits have very, very, very long ears. And it's one of the ways they radiate heat from their body to cool themselves. So animals in hot places typically have long, large extremities to radiate heat. I think of Bergmann's law as Bergmann's big body law, that animals in cold places have large bodies and small extremities. Like polar bears have the cutest little ears so that they don't lose too much heat. Same thing with plants. Tropical plants have large leaves. Desert plants typically are grayish to reflect more light. Anyway, 14 is all about Earth's plant and animal communities and why they look the way they do and how they relate to the soil. So chapters 13 and 14 are why the living parts of Earth look the way they do, and everything that came before that was why Earth's physical surface looks the way it does. So back in January, when the course just started, the sun was coming up at 7:21 and setting at 5:08. We had a 9-hour and 46-minute day at noon. On the 19th, the sun was about 30 degrees above the southern hemisphere, or the southern horizon, rather. And May 19th, the sun's coming up at 5:45, setting at 8:16 for a day length of 14 hours and 31 minutes. The sun is 70 degrees above the horizon at noon. And I wanted to go over the 4 most important things in this class. Number 1, 95% of everything is because of latitude. If you can't explain it because of latitude, chances are It's because of plate tectonics. The other 5% of everything in this class is because of plate tectonics. Water. Water is the key. Water is the key to, well, Earth's water cycle, right? It's the key to patterns of life on Earth. It's the key to types of weathering. Water is so important to everything on Earth, regulating temperatures, transferring heat energy from the tropics up to the poles in the form of water vapor. So water is incredibly important. And yeah, really, climate change affects everything. The climate has changed. The climate is continuing to change. Climate change is going to be the most important topic that will dominate the conversation. If it's not going to dominate the conversation, it'll be there in the background of the conversation, because climate change and the shifts in Earth's energy cycles is really what we're looking at. It's going to affect everything. Yeah, so this is a video showing net primary productivity, which is carbon that's captured from the sun minus energy that the plant uses. And you can see the shifting, especially over Africa. Africa is just about perfect, going from June, September, June, December, June, December. You can see the greening of the mid-latitudes, which is why it's so important for the carbon dioxide cycle. The spikes in the carbon dioxide, the annual cycle of CO2 going up in the wintertime, in northern hemisphere winter, and then down in northern hemisphere summer. You can see that there's really nothing in the southern hemisphere on the same scale as the enormous mid and high latitudes, which are then receiving, 18, 20 hours of sunshine in the summertime. And then in the winter, they're going completely dormant. So the shifting, this is shifting net primary productivity. But if I had a map of shifting energy from the sun over the year, if I had, or a video rather, of shifting insolation, if I had a video of shifting precipitation, it would look very similar, at least over Africa, at least over Asia, southern Asia, it would look very similar. But this is energy being captured, solar energy captured by plants and made into plants, minus the energy that the plants use in doing all that. So that's net primary productivity. I just wanted again to show you, it's just amazing. I could watch this for hours. Yeah, like some places don't really green up, like the Sahara. No. Saudi Arabia? No. Tibetan Plateau? No. Australia? No. Canada? Oh, heck yeah. Boreal, circumpolar Eurasia. Oh yeah, amazing, amazing amounts of energy captured from the sun. So this is a map that I made because I got bored last week in my human geography class, and this is showing Google Earth in the background. And you can see the effect of the ITCZ and the subtropical high and the subtropical high. The green lines represent ethnic boundaries in Africa. Murdoch in 1959 did a study of the ranges and all kinds of aspects of different ethnic groups in Africa. And this map is usually just on a plain background. It's just the outline of the ethnicities over a plain background. And I thought, I wonder what it looks like over Google Earth, because it's obvious that there's much smaller territories down here in sub-Saharan Africa, here in Central Africa, and much larger territories in the tropics and in the subtropics. Subtropics, we've got the skeleton coast of Namibia, the Kalahari Desert, and then in the subtropics, we've got Saudi Arabia and all of the Sahara Desert. But I hadn't seen it draped over this map. Part of the data set for the groups of ethnicities was whether they were nomadic and roaming around, like the red groups, although I suspect that there might be problems with the data, that the red groups are fully nomadic. They don't really have houses. They would have tents. They would move around constantly. The brown areas are semi-nomadic, so maybe they settle down for part of the year, or maybe the grown-ups settle down and the teenagers take the animals and wander around. But you can see the people in the rainier parts of Africa traditionally were sedentary farmers. So nomads in the dry places because you need more land to feed your animals. than in the wet places where you've got more water. And then I also plopped it on top of precip and net primary productivity. Just, yeah, you know, once you got the data loaded, it's fun just to play around and see what other patterns come out. So it really seems like there's a clear relationship between sedentary peoples where it's rainy, nomadic people where it's dry, large territories where it's dry, smaller territories where it's rainy, which again is latitude. I thought I'd share this. This I used as the chapter header for chapter 14 on biomes, and this is a map of bird biodiversity. So it's kind of fun to look at these as a geographer and think, well, what are the factors that are leading to high or low rates, high or low numbers of bird biodiversity? Well, these are the lowest, these are the highest. Sure looks like the Amazon. If it's hot and it's wet, that's better. Hot and dry appears to be the worst, followed by cold. Cold and dry. Cold and wet. Cold and wet appears better than super cold and dry. And also cold and wet is better than hot and dry, but hot and wet looks like, which totally makes sense. This is where the most energy is coming in from the sun that's going to get converted into the most plants that are going to feed the most insects that are going to get eaten by the most birds. So bird biodiversity looks like there's some latitudinal factors going on, and the places that it's not latitude, it's elevation because of plate tectonics. So it's cool to be high. So here in the Tibetan Plateau, it's like 15,000 feet above sea level. It's really cold, really dry, not a lot of birds. Although there are geese that migrate. Himalayan geese migrate over the top of Mount Everest every year, which is just amazing. Yeah, it's really winding down now. Here's the playlist. I share the playlist as part of the videos for this week. I really recommend, I think she has, the Climate Transect is great, the introduction is great, and then the rest of them like beaches, alpine, coastal sage, deserts. She's got, 40 different videos in this playlist. This is Dr. Erica Zavaleta of UC Santa Cruz. She has a field class, Ecosystems of California. She has a textbook for it. And these videos are so geography because she talks about how the location relates to the geology that might influence the soil and how that affects or how the soil and the geology are related to the climate, and how the amount of rainfall and the timing of rainfall relates to the plants and the animals that live there and the adaptations that they've made to live there. So really incredible geographic content they're beautiful settings, nice background music. I would recommend watching the whole playlist at some point in your life. For this week, I would probably start, like I said, with the introduction, the Climate Transect. I think she starts in San Diego, then works her way inland. So it goes from, coastal climates to inland climates to mountain climates to desert climates. Anyway, fantastic series of videos. I cannot recommend them highly enough. And then finally, last, I wanted to leave you with this book, The Ministry for the Future, written by Kim Stanley Robinson. He lives in Davis. His scientific background is just really, really good. He's written a lot of science fiction books. He's written one series just on climate change in the near term. Oh, yeah, there was a trilogy. And then he's written, I think, 2 other books about climate change in the future, like 2300, what it might look like in New York in 2300. The Ministry of the Future is, I think, his best book to date. And it discusses how we can find a way out of the predicament of climate change to create a livable, more equitable planet for all of us. And it's presented from the point of view of human beings, and then little snippets of bits of policy papers that explain the economics of how we can change our economic system to create a more livable, a more just planet. So that's it. That's all I got. If you have any questions, please come to Zoom. I'll be holding Zoom hours on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday next week. The deadline for all your material is Tuesday, the 18th of May at midnight. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you so much for a wonderful semester.